God is not found by the casual seeker, but by the soul that longs and thirsts after him. To treat the knowledge of the holy as something light, something to be reached by half-interest and wandering attention, is to miss the very heart of the matter. The eternal is not discovered as one might discover a new book on a shelf or a song on the radio. He is found by the one whose heart burns with holy desire, who cannot be satisfied until the living God becomes the very center of his existence. The tragedy of our day is that many claim to believe, yet few hunger, few thirst, few pursue with the intensity of a dying man seeking water. The scriptures speak of seeking him with the whole heart, and only then is the promise attached, "You shall find me." A divided heart will not do. A distracted mind will not do. A religion of convenience will not do. God will not reveal himself to the man who gives him the leftovers of his time, the fringes of his attention, the scraps of his love. There are seekers who treat religion as they treat a hobby. They dabble, they glance, they borrow phrases and religious comforts when life grows inconvenient, but they never press through the veil. Such people do not find God, though they may talk about him and sing about him. To find him is to bring the whole self to the altar of surrender, to yield mind, body, and spirit in relentless pursuit of the one who calls. It is not enough to believe in his existence. The demons also believe and they tremble. To know God is to be possessed by a consuming passion, to gaze upon his beauty, to walk in his ways, to hear his voice in the secret hour of prayer. This is why the shallow soul remains unsatisfied. It is not that God hides himself maliciously, but that he will not cheapen himself by being discovered in passing curiosity. He is not revealed to the casual, but to the desperate. The prophets knew it. They cried out with words of thirst, with souls parched for the living God. The psalmist said, "My soul thirsteth for thee. My flesh longeth for thee in a dry and weary land." That is the cry of the true seeker. When such thirst grips the soul, when the world grows tasteless and only God can quench the ache within, then the heavens open, and the seeker finds himself confronted with the reality of the holy. The deeper life is not a luxury for the few, it is the normal Christian life. Here is the deception of our time, that there are two kinds of Christians, ordinary and extraordinary, common and advanced. But the truth is there is only one Christian life, and it is the life hid with Christ in God. Anything less is abnormal, stunted, disease. The deeper life is not a special brand of Christianity, it is Christianity itself. Anything that does not bring us to deeper communion, to deeper surrender, to deeper transformation, is a counterfeit. The tragedy is that the church has accepted a divided standard. We tolerate spiritual dwarfs and call them normal. We make peace with a religion of form and imagine it to be enough. But the true faith has always been a fire, not an institution. It has always been a radical break with the world, not a polite adjustment to it. To live shallowly, to remain on the surface, is not to live at all. God calls his children into the depths. He calls them away from the noise of the marketplace, away from the applause of men, away from the trinkets of this passing age. He calls them into the secret place where he dwells. To imagine that this call is only for a few chosen souls is to insult the cross. The blood was not shed that we might live half-hearted lives. The Spirit was not given that we might remain unchanged. The promise of the indwelling Christ is for all, not for a select circle of mystics. The deeper life is the natural result of a true encounter with God. When Christ enters, he will not be content to decorate the surface. He will go deep, he will remake, he will consume, he will transform. But this requires that men and women be willing. It requires the death of self, the crucifixion of pride, the laying down of every rival affection. It requires a willingness to be different, to be misunderstood, to walk a narrow road while the crowd rushes in the opposite direction. Few are willing, not because the path is hidden, but because the price is high. Yet to refuse this way is to choose a barren existence, a Christianity without Christ, a faith without fire. The one who seeks God casually will never know him. The one who treats the deeper life as optional will never taste it. But to the soul who longs with holy hunger, the Spirit whispers, "Come closer." To the heart that thirsts with relentless desire, the fountain flows freely. And once the taste of the living water is known, nothing else satisfies. Many complain that God seems distant. They say they pray, but the heavens are silent. They confess they go to worship, yet their hearts remain dry. The fault is not with God but with the heart. He reveals himself to those who seek him as for hidden treasure, who will leave behind the glitter of fool's gold to press after the eternal. The deeper life is no accident, it is pursued. It is entered by violence, the violence of holy determination, the seizing of the kingdom by men and women who will not be denied. Consider the prophet, consider the saints of old. They were not casual seekers. They turned from the world's comforts. They endured its scorn. They bore the heat of its hatred, and still they pressed on. Why? Because they had seen something greater. They had touched the hem of the eternal. Nothing else could hold them. Theirs was not an extraordinary life in the sense of being beyond our reach. It was simply the normal life of one who takes God at his word, who dares to believe he can be known, who dares to lay aside every distraction to follow hard after him. What hinders us today is not ignorance of doctrine, but indifference of desire. We have the words of Scripture, we have the hymns of the saints, we have the witness of centuries, but we lack the burning hunger. We are satisfied too easily, content with sermons, programs, and activity. We mistake motion for life, noise for power, and attendance for devotion. Meanwhile, the soul languishes. We want enough of God to keep us comfortable, but not enough to make us holy, enough to inspire, but not enough to transform, enough to warm us, but not enough to consume us. But the God who reveals himself is not so divided. He comes in fire, he comes in fullness, he comes to overwhelm, to rule, to be all in all. He will not be a mere influence among others. He will not share his temple with idols. If we would know him, we must seek him with a whole heart. We must go past the casual glance and the polite prayer. We must bend our souls in desperate longing until knowing him becomes more necessary than breath itself. This is the call. Deeper, always deeper, beyond surface, religion beyond empty forms, beyond shallow profession. The true Christian life is not lived on the edges but at the center, where God himself dwells. Anything else is abnormal, stunted, a pale imitation of the life he intends. To know God requires self-denial and the abandonment of idols, visible and invisible. The greatest barrier to the deeper life is not ignorance, but self. It is not that men do not understand the truth, it is that they refuse to die to themselves. The ancient word still stands. If any man will come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Self-denial is not an elective, it is the essence of discipleship. There is no communion with God where self is enthroned. The carnal self must be crucified. The proud self must be humbled. The stubborn self must be broken. Only then can the soul be free to behold God as he is. This is why many never progress. They want God without the cross, heaven without surrender, blessing without brokenness. They come with open hands but closed hearts. They pray for fullness but refuse emptiness. They ask for God but will not part with their idols. Yet the word remains true. No man can serve two masters. If Christ is to reign, the self must be dethroned. The throne of the heart is not wide enough for two. Either Christ rules or the self rules, but never both. The idols that hinder us are not always carved in wood or stone. They're often invisible, hidden in the folds of our heart, the idol of reputation, the idol of success, the idol of comfort, the idol of pleasure, the idol of control. These dwell unseen, yet they hold the soul with stronger chains than any outward image. It is not enough to remove what is outwardly offensive. The inward tyrants must be cast down as well. God does not merely demand a portion of the heart, he demands all. Until the idols fall, there will be no vision of the holy. The prophets thundered against idols because they understood this. An idol is anything that takes the place of God in the affections. An idol is anything you trust more than him, anything you love more than him, anything you serve in place of him. And it makes no difference if the idol is an object, a person, or even a cherished idea. The jealous God will not divide his glory. He will not enter a temple already crowded with rivals. He waits for the cleansing. He waits for the surrender. He waits for the casting down of every false god before he comes in his fullness. The way of self-denial is painful, for it is the way of the cross. It requires that we say no when everything in us cries yes. It requires that we lay down the crown of pride and embrace the yoke of humility. It requires that we confess, "Not my will but thine be done," and mean it with trembling sincerity. The flesh revolts at such a demand, for self loves to reign. But unless the cross cuts deep, unless the axe is laid to the root of self, there will be no abiding fellowship with the eternal. The surface may glitter with religious language and outward piety, but the heart will remain divided, and the life will remain barren. Yet for the one who yields, who truly abandons all, the reward is beyond measure. When the idols fall, when the self is crucified, when the heart is emptied of rivals, the presence of God fills the soul with glory. Then the life becomes fruitful. Then prayer becomes living, then worship becomes real. The deeper life is not for the man who clings to himself, but for the one who lays himself down, who counts all things lost for the excellency of the knowledge of Christ Jesus. The world is too much with us. We must break free from its tyranny to hear the voice of eternity. The world presses upon us every hour. It shouts, it flatters, it seduces, it commands our attention. Its voices are many, its attractions relentless. To live in the world without being of the world is the great challenge of the soul. For the world has its systems, its ways of thinking, its glittering treasures, its false securities, and all are designed to bind the soul to time and keep it from eternity. The man who would know God must learn to silence the world's voices, to withdraw from its tyranny and to fix his gaze upon the unseen. The problem is not that the world exists, but that we have given it too much of ourselves. We have allowed its patterns to shape our minds, its ambitions to shape our desires, its pleasures to shape our pursuits. We measure success by its standards. We define happiness by its formulas. We chase after its rewards as though they were eternal. Meanwhile, the voice of God grows faint. The eternal whispers are drowned in the clamor of the temporary. The soul cannot serve two worlds. To be a friend of the world is to be at enmity with God. Yet how many try to balance both, to hold the world in one hand and eternity in the other? Such an effort ends in weariness and defeat. The world is jealous, just as God is jealous. It will not let you go easily. It demands your hours, your thoughts, your affections. It weaves its nets of distraction until the soul no longer even knows it is bound. Breaking free requires violence. The violence of spiritual determination. The soul must rise up and say, "Enough." It must turn off the world's voices, lay down the world's toys, reject the world's applause, and step into the silence where God's. It is in that silence that eternity presses upon the soul, reminding us that all the things men cherish are but dust and ashes, that the pleasures of a season are fleeting, that the applause of men dies in the grave. Only the voice of God endures. Only the truth of eternity stands when the world has passed away. The world cannot satisfy, yet it pretends that it can. It builds glittering cities. It offers pleasures and diversions. It crowns men with temporary fame, but beneath its smile lies the dust of death. All its treasures rot, all its idols crumble, all its pleasures fade. The man who invests himself in the world wakes one day to find he is built on sand. But the man who turns from the tyranny of the world to the voice of eternity discovers a foundation that cannot be moved, a treasure that cannot be stolen, a joy that cannot wither. The saints of the past understood this. They were pilgrims and strangers upon the earth. They confessed that they sought a better country, a heavenly one. They endured the loss of all things because they looked not at the things which are seen but at the things which are unseen. They refused the world's crowns because they sought the crown of life. They silenced the world's voices because they longed for the voice of God, and having chosen eternity, they found that the world lost its hold. So it must be with us. If we would know the deeper life, we must turn from the tyranny of the world. We must set our affections on things above, not on things on the earth. We must walk as those whose citizenship is in heaven, who wait for the city that hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Only then will the noise of time grow faint. Only then will the voice of eternity be heard. And in that voice the soul finds rest. Faith is not theory but encounter. It is meeting the living Christ in secret prayer. Many speak of faith as if it were a formula, a set of propositions to be memorized and repeated. But faith is not a creed on paper. It is not a system of thought, nor is it mere agreement with doctrine. True faith is encounter, the living soul standing face to face with the living God. The difference between a theoretical faith and a living faith is the difference between reading a description of fire and being burned by it, between hearing of water and drinking it to quench your thirst. Faith must be more than mental assent. It must be the living response of a soul awakened by the Spirit, brought into communion with Christ Himself. This is why prayer is central. For prayer is not the recitation of words, it is the opening of the heart to God, the laying bare of the soul before Him, the sacred meeting where faith is exercised. It is in secret prayer that the soul discovers whether faith is theory or reality. If a man can pray to a God who does not answer, a God who does not move, a God who does not speak and yet remains satisfied, then his faith is only theory. But the man who prays with hunger, who waits in stillness, who seeks until he finds, is the man who encounters God, and his faith becomes alive. The scriptures are filled with men who met God not in theory but in living encounter. Abraham believed God, and it was counted unto him for righteousness. But his belief was not abstract. It was an encounter that led him to leave his country and trust the promises of the unseen. Moses did not simply agree with a doctrine of deliverance. He met the God of the burning bush, and that encounter turned a shepherd into a prophet. Isaiah did not merely hold to the idea of holiness. He saw the Lord high and lifted up, and his lips were touched by the live coal of fire. Each of these moments of faith was an encounter, and from that encounter sprang obedience, transformation, and power. Our danger today is that we have settled for faith as definition instead of faith as experience. We can recite creeds, we can explain doctrines, we can argue theology, but do we know God? Have we met Him in the secret place where His presence overwhelms us, where His voice shakes us, where His holiness burns away our pride? Without that meeting, our faith remains words without light. It is only when faith moves from theory to encounter that the Christian life begins to shine with reality. The heart that worships is greater than the head that knows. Knowledge is valuable, but it is never enough. A man may fill his mind with doctrines, study the ancient languages, understand every nuance of theology, and still be spiritually barren. For knowledge without worship is dry, lifeless, and proud. Worship is the soul's response to the presence of God, the heart bowing before the greatness of the eternal. When the heart is moved to adore, when love rises like incense, when humility bends in reverence, that soul is nearer to God than the scholar who merely analyzes His name. Worship is not confined to words, nor is it confined to a sanctuary. It is the posture of the heart, the turning of the whole being toward God in love and awe. The heart that worships can worship in silence, in song, in work, in solitude. What matters is not the form but the reality. Worship springs from an awareness of who God is, and when that awareness dawns upon the soul, nothing is left but reverence and wonder. Worship lifts us above ourselves, beyond our thoughts, into the presence of the one who is worthy. The danger of knowledge without worship is that it breeds pride. We mistake our information for intimacy, our learning for life. But the devil himself knows more theology than any living saint, and yet he does not worship. Knowledge can puff up, worship humble. Knowledge may argue, worship adores. Knowledge may stand and recite, worship falls on its knees and trembles. The man who knows God truly will worship Him. The man who merely knows about Him may become clever, but he remains barren. Consider the difference between one who only knows and one who worships. The man of knowledge may discuss the attributes of God. The man of worship feels them. The one may list the perfections of the divine. The other beholds them and is The one may argue that God is holy. The other cries, holy, 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 and his lips are cleansed by fire. The difference is life itself. Worship transforms where knowledge alone cannot. Worship makes the soul tender. It breaks the pride of the intellect. It awakens love. It draws heaven near. This is why the greatest saints were not necessarily the greatest scholars, but they were always worshipers. Their hearts were aflame with adoration. They were not content to know about God. They longed to know Him. Their prayers were not exercises in language. They were burning offerings of love. Their songs were not mere music. They were the outpouring of hearts overwhelmed by glory, and it was their worship that carried them through trial, that lifted them above the world, that gave them strength to endure and courage to stand. The heart that worships is greater than the head that knows, not because knowledge is unimportant, but because worship is its fulfillment. Knowledge without worship ends in pride. Worship without knowledge may end in error. But when knowledge leads to worship, when truth awakens love, when the head bows to the heart and both are lifted to God, then the soul is whole. Faith encounters God, and worship adores. This is the deeper life, not words without power, not theory without meaning, not knowledge without adoration, but the living soul beholding the living God and bowing before Him in love. Our greatest tragedy is not unanswered prayer, but unoffered prayer. The greatest weakness of the church is not that God refuses to hear, but that His people refuse to pray. Heaven is not silent because the ear of God has grown dull, but because the lips of men have grown mute. We complain that we do not see revival, that power is absent, that the heavens seem closed, but the closed heavens are not a judgment against prayers unanswered. They are the result of prayers never prayed. The greatest indictment against the modern Christian is not that he prayed and received nothing, but that he did not pray at all. Prayer is the very breath of the Christian soul. To cease from prayer is to cut off communion, to shut the door of the inner room, to silence the only means by which man may touch the throne of God. The disciples did not ask their Lord to teach them how to preach or how to organize or how to lead. They asked Him, "Lord, teach us to pray." They understood that the secret of His power was His hidden life of prayer. He withdrew to lonely places. He spent nights in communion. He rose early before dawn to seek the face of the Father. If the Son of God lived in unbroken dependence upon prayer, how much more must His disciples? Yet we have grown careless. We rush through words. We recite formulas. We delegate prayer to a few. We imagine that public petitions are enough. Meanwhile, the closet remains empty, the secret place abandoned, the hour of prayer neglected. And in that neglect lies the weakness of the church. Programs abound, but power is absent. Activities multiply, but the fire burns low. We are busy, but we are barren. The world is not moved because the church no longer kneels. Prayer is not merely asking, it is communion. It is not a shopping list presented to heaven, but a meeting with God in stillness, in reverence and love. It is not the endless talking of man to God, but the quiet listening of man before God. Prayer is the place where the heart is searched, where the soul is laid bare, where idols are revealed, where the will is bent, where love is rekindled. To pray is to stand in the holy presence until the light exposes the darkness within, until the fire cleanses the dross, until the soul is conformed to the image of Christ. The tragedy of unoffered prayer is that it robs the soul of transformation. It leaves us untouched, unchanged, unrenewed. Without prayer, the word remains theory. Worship remains surface. Service remains hollow. Prayer breathes life into all else. Without it, all else withers. The saint who does not pray becomes a shadow of what he was meant to be. The church that does not pray becomes a machine without breath. The tragedy is not that God will not answer, but that His people will not ask. Holiness is not a doctrine to be discussed, but a fire to be experienced. We have made holiness a subject for debate, a term to be defined, a topic for books and conference, but holiness was never meant to be an abstract concept. It is a living flame that burns in the heart. To speak of holiness without experiencing it is like describing the sun without ever seeing its light. Holiness is not words but fire, not talk but transformation. It is the burning reality of God's presence within the soul, purifying, consuming, renewing. The scriptures do not present holiness as an option for the few, but as the very condition of seeing God. Be you holy, for I am holy. Without holiness no man shall see the Lord. Yet many are content to discuss holiness while avoiding its demands. They analyze it, but do not pursue it. They define it, but do not live it. They are warmed by the idea of holiness, but refuse the fire itself. Holiness is costly because it requires the death of sin, the death of self, the purging of every unclean thing. It exposes what we would rather hide. It burns away what we would rather keep. It calls us to live different from the world. Holiness is separation from all that defiles, but it is also union with all that is of God. It is the very life of God within the soul, reproducing His character, shaping His image, filling His presence. Holiness is not the improvement of the old self, but the crucifixion of the old and the birth of the new. Those who have tasted holiness never forget it. It is like a fire shut up in their bones. It is not a burden but a joy, not a cold discipline, but a living delight. The holy man does not boast of his holiness, for he sees more of God and less of himself. Holiness makes a man humble, for he beholds the beauty of the Lord and knows his own unworthiness. Holiness makes a man bold, for he is freed from the fear of men and compelled only by the will of God. Holiness makes a man loving, for the heart of God flows through him to others. Holiness is not mere morality, not rule-keeping, not religious polish. It is the very presence of God transforming a life into His likeness. The church of our day has many teachers, but few holy men, many words but little fire. We do not need more discussions about holiness. We need men and women who burn with it. We do not need definitions of purity. We need lives that radiate. We do not need arguments about separation. We need saints who are unmistakably set apart. For when the world sees holiness, it sees God. When it sees words only, it sees nothing. The fire of holiness is available. It falls where there is surrender, where the heart cries out to be purified, where the soul will not rest until it is made clean. It is the same fire that touched Isaiah's lips, the same flame that burned in the early church, the same presence that marked the saints through the age. It is not theory, it is life. And until we move from discussion to experience, from words to fire, from doctrine to reality, we will never know the fullness of God. Revival begins not in the multitude, but in the solitary soul that dares to go all the way with God. We often imagine that revival is a matter of crowds, of movements, of great campaigns that sweep over cities, but history and scripture tell another story. Revival is born in secret before it is ever known in public. It begins not with the multitude, but with the one heart that refuses compromise, one soul that will not be content with a nominal faith, one man or woman who bows before God in total surrender. This is the spark from which the fire spreads. The tendency of our time is to place confidence in machinery, in organization, in numbers. We calculate attendance, we measure responses, we build structures and expect the Spirit to fill them. But the Spirit does not move according to our designs. He comes where hearts are prepared, and hearts are prepared one by one. Before the world ever knows of revival, heaven has already marked the solitary soul on its knees, weeping, waiting, hungering for God to move. The crowds may hear the echo, but the flame begins with the few, or even with one. The solitary soul who dares to go all the way with God must break with the spirit of the age. He must walk against the current. He must endure misunderstanding. He must face loneliness. For few are willing to walk the narrow road. But that road, though lonely, is where God meets a man. It is there that the Spirit anoints, there that the fire falls, there that a life becomes the channel through which revival flows. The great mistake is to imagine that revival can be manufactured by human means. But revival is always the work of God through the vessel that has been cleansed and surrendered. When men and women pray until they are heard, when they wait until the Spirit fills, when they surrender until nothing remains but God Himself, revival comes, and it does not begin with a nation but with a soul. It does not start with the multitude, but with the one who dares to pay the price. The history of the church is the history of solitary saints who would not rest in mediocrity. A Luther who nailed his cry to a church door. A Wesley who burned until the world felt his flame. A Finney who prayed until whole towns trembled. Each began as one, alone with God, willing to be different, willing to go further, willing to surrender everything. That is the secret. Revival is born in the secret place long before it is seen in the public square. Eternity presses in upon time, and only the one who walks with God will not be ashamed when the shadows fall. Life is fleeting, yet we live as though it will never end. We spend our days in pursuit of things that vanish, We trade the eternal for the temporary. We grasp at shadows while the substance of eternity presses in upon us. The truth is that eternity is not far away. It is here, pressing against every hour, every choice, every breath. Time is only the thin veil behind which eternity waits, and when the shadows fall, when life's day comes to its close, the veil will be lifted, and what we lived for will be revealed. The tragedy is that many will be ashamed in that hour. For when eternity is unveiled, the works of time will be tested. That which was of God will endure. That which was of the flesh will burn. The applause of men will not matter. The wealth of the world will not count. The pleasures of the flesh will not satisfy. Only the soul that walked with God will stand unashamed. The man who lived for eternity while still in time, who sought the unseen more than the seen, who kept his eye on the eternal city rather than the passing world, will rejoice when the shadows fall. Eternity presses upon us even now, calling us to live differently. It whispers that every choice matters, every hour is sacred, every soul is eternal. It reminds us that our lives are but a vapor, but what is done for God endures forever. The world lives in forgetfulness, drowning itself in distractions, pretending that death is distant and eternity unreal. But the one who walks with God lives with eternity always before his eyes. He does not waste his hours, he redeems them. He does not cling to possessions, he holds them loosely. He does not fear the judgment. He longs for the appearing of his Lord. To walk with God is to live in harmony with eternity even while bound to time. It is to be anchored beyond the grave, to be rooted in what cannot be shaken. It is to live each day as though standing before the throne, each act weighed against the eternal, each step guided by the unseen. Such a life is not wasted, for when the shadows fall, it opens into everlasting light. The man who has walked with God will find that eternity is no stranger but a home long expected. The call then is urgent. Revival must begin with the solitary soul who will dare to surrender fully, and that soul must live with eternity in view. For time is short, eternity is long, and only what is born of God will endure when the veil is lifted. Revival begins with one, that eternity will reveal all. The soul that dares to go all the way with God now will not be ashamed when the shadows fall, for eternity will bear witness that he walked with God and lived for what cannot die. The time has come to gather these things into a solemn conclusion. For truth is not given merely to inform, but to transform, not to entertain the mind, but to awaken the soul. We have seen that God is not found by the casual seeker, that the deeper life is not a luxury for the few, that idols must be cast down, that the world must be silenced, that faith is an encounter, that worship is greater than knowledge, that prayer neglected is our tragedy, that holiness is a fire, that revival begins with one, and that eternity presses upon every hour of time. These are not ideas to be admired from a distance. They are calls to action, calls to surrender, calls to a new way of living. The voice of God is heard through them, and the soul must respond. The greatest danger of hearing truth is that we might admire it but not obey it, that we might applaud the words but not bow to the reality. The church of today has no shortage of truth. Sermons are preached, books are written, messages are broadcast. Yet the tragedy is that much truth has gone unused, much light has not been walked in, much fire has been admired but not entered. To hear without obeying is to grow harder, to become immune to the very voice that calls us. It is possible to love the beauty of truth and never be changed by it. That is the peril before us now. The deeper life requires decision. It does not come to the indifferent, nor to the procrastinator, nor to the one who waits for a more convenient season. It comes to the soul that today in this hour says yes to God with finality. There is no other way. God does not reveal himself to the double-minded. He does not fill the vessel that is already full. He does not lead the wanderer who refuses to move. The call demands surrender, and surrender must be total. The idols must fall. We must examine our hearts in the light of God and ask, what have I loved more than him? What have I trusted more than him? What have I served in place of him? These idols may be invisible, hidden beneath respectable appearances, cloaked in religious language, yet they are deadly nonetheless. Until they are cast down, we will never know the fullness of God. To cling to them is to remain on the surface. To let them go is to enter the depths. The Spirit waits to fill, but he will not share his temple with rivals. The world must be silent. Its voices are many and loud, and they drown the whisper of eternity. We are daily surrounded by noise, by demands, by glittering distractions that press in upon us. If we are to hear God, we must break free from the tyranny of the world. We must choose stillness. We must enter solitude. We must turn aside from the noise to hear the eternal word. The world will mock, it will tempt, it will threaten, but the soul that sets its face toward God will find that eternity outweighs time, that heaven outweighs earth, that the unseen outweighs all that is seen. Faith must be more than theory. It must be encounter. We must not be content to talk about God. We must meet him. We must not be satisfied with learning about him. We must know him. Prayer is the place of this encounter, the secret room where the soul waits before God until his presence becomes reality. Without prayer, all else is powerless. Without encounter, all else is theory. The deeper life is found not in books or lectures, but in the closet of prayer where the soul meets God and is changed by him. Worship must rise. Worship is the language of heaven, the response of the soul to the greatness of God. Knowledge is good, but worship is greater. We do not truly know until we adore. We do not truly understand until we bow. The call is for worshipers, not merely for students. The Father seeks those who worship him in spirit and in truth, whose hearts are aflame with love, whose souls bend in reverence, whose lives are offered as sacrifices of praise. When knowledge leads to worship, when truth awakens adoration, then the church becomes radiant, and the presence of God is manifest among his people. Prayer must return to its rightful place. The absence of prayer is the absence of power. The neglect of prayer is the explanation for our barrenness. It is not that God refuses to answer, but that his people refuse to ask. The challenge is not unanswered prayer, but unoffered prayer. We must become a people who pray, who wait, who seek, who refuse to let go until heaven moves. Every revival in history has been born in prayer, not in programs. Every fire of God has been kindled in secret before it has blazed in public. If we would see his power again, we must pray again, with tears, with hunger, with persistence. Holiness must be pursued. It is not an idea to be discussed, but a fire to be experienced. God is holy, and without holiness, no man shall see the Lord. To speak of him without seeking holiness is hypocrisy. To claim his name without his likeness is deception. The call is not to respectability, not to morality, not to outward religion, but to holiness, the burning presence of God in the soul, cleansing, purifying, transforming. It will cost us everything, but it will give us everything. For holiness is the very beauty of God upon his people. Revival must begin with one. Do not wait for the multitude. Do not wait for the crowd. Do not wait for the church at large. Revival never begins that way. It begins when one soul dares to go all the way with God. One heart that will not settle for less. One life that will not be conformed to this world. One man or woman who falls to their knees in surrender and rises in the power of the Spirit. That is how God moves. That is how the fire spread. The call is to you, not to someone else, not to the church in general, not to the nation only, but to you. Will you be the one eternity presses upon us? We are not playing at religion. We are standing on the edge of forever. Every choice carries weight beyond time. Every hour is precious. Every soul is immortal. Every act will echo into eternity. The shadows are lengthening, and soon time will be no more. What we live for will be revealed. What we sought will be exposed. What we loved will be known. Only the one who has walked with God will stand unashamed when the veil is lifted. Eternity is pressing upon us now, urging us to live differently, to walk with God, to seek the things above, to set our affections on the unseen. This is the challenge of the deeper life, not to be content with the surface, not to settle for theory, not to rest in forms, not to be satisfied with half-measures. It is to seek God with the whole heart, to deny self, to cast down idols, to silence the world, to pray until heaven opens, to worship until adoration consumes, to be holy as he is holy, to be the one through whom revival begins, to live every hour in the light of eternity. The challenge is before us, the choice